podcast of Southern Dirt Motorsports. Today I have helping me host this Mike Luna and Gary Lawrence, and our special guest is Bobby and Robby Mason. There's about 40 plus years of racing history and still some modern day things happening here. They're going to share their racing story with us, where they have been, where they're at, and where they hope to go. And maybe they'll share a little bit with us too on what they'd like to see racing become and improve on. So Bobby, if you will, tell us, start this, because you're the start of this racing story. So where and how did Bobby get started racing?
I was born and raised in Middle Valley, and we had some local heroes there, and one of them was Harrison Chandler, and he drove an old Skeeter, and I got to hang around his shop down there and going to races with him. And in the late 60s, about 69, they quit running the Skeeters and started the full body cars. So I helped him build the first 55 Chevrolet, and we run at Boyd's. And Harrison was a big old guy, great big old guy. So I just fell in love with it. I was drag racing in high school with the 55 Chevrolet, but I fell in love with that dirt track racing. So we run it in Cleveland, and a good story on that, Crossville. That Labor Day in 1969, they had a Labor Day race over there. So we went over there and run with them boys, and had an old 56 Ford pickup truck we pulled that race car with, and that trailer just swapped ends from one end to the other. I mean, it was junk. But anyway, went over there and won the race, and on Labor Day they had a greasy pig show where they turned loose, and they soaked that pig down with burnt motor oil. Well, guess what? Harrison's the one that caught that greasy pig, and I had to ride all the way back to Hickson smelling that burnt motor oil in that thing. But anyway, that's the start of it. And then the next year, he worked at Combustion Engineering, and they went on strike. So he was working at a service station, and I stopped in there on the way home from work one afternoon. I said, "Harrison, what are we going to do next year for a race car?" He said, "We, quote, ain't going to do nothing. You are. It's yours." So he gave me my first race car. It's 55 Chevrolet. It had everything but a motor in it. So I round up, got a motor and put it in there. And I raced at mostly Cleveland for a couple of years. And Robby come along, and his mama, she didn't like it too good because I was racing and spending more time racing than I was with her and that baby. So I give it up, and in 78 I built another garage and started racing again. I picked up an old hobby car with another friend of ours, and we raced that for a while. And then Morris Bice, he moved over there in our shop and stayed for a while. And then when Robby got 14, Joe Lee come up with this pony class at Cleveland Speedway. So we built our first pony car for Robby. Everybody back then was running Pintos. Well, I didn't want no Pinto. I wanted a Chevrolet. I wanted a baby. So a guy by the name of Ken Lurch, he's an old timer. He sent me word that he had two Vegas. One had a good body and one had a good engine. So me and Robby went and picked them things up, and I made him gut the car himself. I said, "Big boy, if you want to race, we're going to see if you want to race."
And how old was he at that time?
14.
And I'll just add to that, I wasn't inside the shop, I was outside the shop, in the gravels.
Yeah.
So
Working your way into
exactly
the
right.
shop.
But anyway, I didn't have a tubing bender, and naturally Ronnie Johnson had a bender, and I talked to RJ, and he said, "Yeah, I'd love to help you put a cage in that." So I went down there, and Ronnie worked back then. He worked all night long. He'd sleep all day, then he'd work all night. So I went down there and spent the night with him, and we put a roll cage in that little car, and he said, hey, by the way, he said, I have got a little old fuel cell. I don't know, it couldn't have been over 2 gallons, was it, Rob? Huh?
8.
It was 8. Don't seem like it's that big. We got a fuel cell from him, and that little seat that we got the seat from him. So Ronnie helped us get started with that little car. And I think you won, what, 16 out of 31 races with it?
18 out of 38.
Okay, 18 out of 38 anyway.
That's enough to make a guy want to drive a race car.
Well, he showed, we didn't, me and Morris helped him a lot. We didn't do everything for him. He has done it and he learned it on his own. And, you know, his education has helped a whole lot. He went on to college and he's got a degree in CAD/CAM and his associate's degree in
That is a big help.
mechanical engineering. And he's designed us some of the nicest trailers ever built. We built them right there in our shop. But that's it. That's how we got started. So he could probably pick it up from there.
I need, before we get too far into this, I guess I should have mentioned earlier, you guys do have a real successful shop. Just if you would, tell me what you do in this shop, where you are, but sort of how it came about too, with your shop.
Well, you know, it's just primarily for us. Back in the late 80s and stuff, I was doing some sheet metal work and some setup work on some Camaros, what was called the street stock class. At that time, we had quite a bit of success in '87 with Camaros. So we had some of our competition after we had moved up to the next class kind of come to us and said, hey, since you're not running this class anymore, can you kind of help us and get our program going? So I was doing some setup work and different things like that for them, but never really had been like a full-blown race shop for other people. It's always just been for us.
But do you do work for other people though?
Not as much. You know, I have a little bit in the past, but not as much anymore. It's what we do now is so time-consuming. And you have to look at your job, you have to look at your family, and you know, in my younger days, racing was probably my #1 priority. You know, as you get older, your priorities change and shift. So now racing, which I still love, is still important to me, but it's further down the list now. You know, I've got those 2 little girls that, you know, they're high on my priority list, and my wife, and obviously your job, you know, is what enables you to do what you do. But you know, I don't have the time to devote to it. I used to eat, drink, and sleep, you know, and just can't.
It's always of interest. What is your full-time job?
I am the plant manager at Davis & Davis Rugs. So what we do, we make custom design rugs and carpet for a lot of casinos in Las Vegas. We do a lot for the aviation industry, just small Lear jets and so on like that. We do a lot of aircraft material as well as high-end wool rugs is what we make. So I'm the plant manager.
It's always of interest to people. They come to the races, they watch a guy drive, but they forget that there's a real life, that he's got another life outside of being in that race car. And some of the vocations that guys have, it's really interesting, the different, where people come from that climb into those race cars. Have you guys, Bobby and Robby, both of you, did you historically build your engines and yourself, or did some other guys help you with that?
No, I tell you, the guy that really got us started with engines, and it was a 4-cylinder engine for the Vega, was Mike Hedgecock with Eagle Racing Engines. That's where we started, and I don't know how many engines he built for us, but him and Irvin Hickman. Irvin is another one that's passed on. He built our engines, but right now, Richard Harvey is building our engines for us. He's one of our main sponsors. He owns S&H Erectors, and his brother, Robert Harvey, he owns Tennessee Construction, Tennessee Roofing Construction, so they pretty well keep us in motors. We got 2 wonderful sponsors. There's no way that we could race the way we do today if it was not for Richard and Robert.
And what kind of business are they in?
Steel erection, millwright type work, crane rental. They've got a big shop over there on Hickson Pike. It's a machine shop. They can handle big items. They take care of, before the foundries started going out of business, they take care of the maintenance in the foundries, and so they just do a lot of heavy maintenance work.
Well, I'll ask this too, and I like to hear about the different sponsors with their interest in racing, because they're a big part, huge part of what keeps racing going, because it's gotten so expensive, late models especially, that you've got to have some help to really be successful anymore. Well, do you guys, do you build your own chassis?
We assemble them, but we don't build them. We run one chassis.
Okay.
So we actually, the cars that we have now, we bought used from Bob Gardner, just outside of Peoria, Illinois. And we brought them home, raced them a little bit, and then it was winter time actually when we bought those cars, and then we just stripped them, went back to them, cleaned them up, put them back together. So,
I know you mentioned your CAD/CAM experience too. Do you still design, do any design work at all?
unfortunately not. That's something that I had some interest in working on some front end stuff, and had started designing some spindle stuff and looking at some spindles. I had some ideas that I was kind of trying to play around with, and I really feel like it probably would have worked better in an asphalt type situation than it would have a dirt type situation. I was looking at what's called zero scrub, and kind of got off into that for a little bit, kind of chasing my tail there a little bit, but the CAD on just doing things like that was really
It's a full-time occupation.
Absolutely.
I was just interested that we used to use that in work a lot, and I was just interested in what you were, or if you still were doing that. I want to get back Bobby over here a little bit too. I know he laid the groundwork for where you are now. I guess as we go through there's usually a track that becomes really good to us, or we were good to it, or a combination, and it becomes one of our favorite tracks. If you had to have a favorite track, which one would it be?
It's gone now, but Cleveland's Speedway.
That seemed to be synonymous with a lot of people that really did like that.
Yeah, well, I run there when this guy by the name of Bill Thaxton was the promoter then. That's before Joe Lee took it over. But,
Are you talking about Joe Lee Johnson?
Joe Lee Johnson, yeah.
For all of y'all that might not be familiar with some of this in old time, Joe Lee Johnson was a legend. He was a true legend that we could talk about for a week. But that's a good association to have there.
Did you get to run, that's about the time they changed everything over with Harold, Freddie Fryer and that bunch?
I got to race, I was fortunate enough, I got to race with Harold. Never did get to race with Freddie. Friday Hassler, got to race with him. Joe Lee Johnson, Jerry Meadows, if any of y'all remember Jerry Meadows, Man Hawkins, that's
30
ones
inches.
I think of off the top of my head. But it was fun. Now Harold Fryer, now talking about character, now that rascal was a character. He was driving for Hickman's one night up there at Cleveland, and the steering wheel on his car wasn't the size that he liked. So he come over to my car, and he said, he called me Mason. He said, Mason, he said, I want that steering wheel off that car. I said, you do? He said, yeah. I said, well, what am I going to do? He said, I don't care. He said, I want that steering wheel. I said, well, you ain't getting it. And I had Harrison Chandler with me then, and he looked like the Jolly Green Giant. So Harold found out real quick he wasn't getting my steering wheel.
Well, if you've raced very long and raced with Harold Fryer, you had an opportunity to be behind him. So,
Yeah.
So usually what you saw from behind Harold Fryer was two big elbows.
Yep.
Out of that
How about Skeeter?
Yeah,
out of that Skeeter.
That's right.
A good friend of mine and yours has got one of his Skeeters
Oh,
that he has
yeah.
put back together. It's about, I guess, 95% looks like what it did back when he raced it. Here.
Yeah.
Really done a good job.
It was one of the last Skeeters, I'd say, somewhere that they run over there.
And we
Okay.
all liked old Harold. He was, saying he was a character, that's been masked.
that's it, yeah.
He put on a show, I'll say that.
Oh, I'll
for
tell
him.
you, he would.
Robbie, or Bobby, I need, what's one of the most memorable races that you ever did? Maybe you didn't win it, maybe you did, but what's one of the most, when you just think about your racing, sitting around some night, what's one of the races that comes to mind?
Well, I mentioned Jerry Meadows. I had just built, we were changing over from the 55 Chevrolet bodies. We was putting Camaro and Chevy 2 bodies on it. Well, I had a 62 Nova that I put on mine, and you guys, we took a 55 Chevrolet frame and did just cut it, put it back together and shortened it up for the wheelbase for a Chevy 2. Well, me and Jerry started on the pole. I won the heat race that night, and we started on the pole. And we took off, and I got out in front of Jerry, and I led him all night long. He'd come right up to my quarter panel and let me know he was there, and he'd back off. So after the race was over, I was just absolutely beside myself. I was so tickled I couldn't see. And Jerry come over, and he called me Little Red. I used to be red-headed before I got old. He said, Little Red, he said, I'm proud of you. I said, Jerry, I said, you had the opportunity to spin me out and win that race. He said, no. He said, you earned that race, Mason. You earned that one. That is one of the most memorable ones I had. And
That says a lot about his character, too.
oh, Jerry Meadows was good. He's a fine fella. He'd help you in any way. He'd help you in any way.
Okay, sometimes things don't always go like somebody thinks they ought to go. What was one of the biggest altercations you were ever involved in?
I think for you, you probably need to bring up Mr. Joey Johnson.
Well, yeah, I like I say, I was racing with Joe Lee. This was the last race of the season, and me and Joe Lee I think we started second row. Well, come down, give us a green flag, come down the straightaway, and Joe Lee's hard to race with, but he cut me no slack, none whatsoever. We went into turn one. All I seen was the stars and the clouds, because he done put me in the wall. I went up, flipped around, and come back down on my tail, pulled my 55 Chevrolet all to pieces. But
Needless to say, you were delighted at the situation.
no, I wasn't a bit pleased. But now, you ever see Joe Lee get out of the car? You'd think he's 7 foot tall. You know, you have to look up to him. So I just kind of let that slide. Build another car for the next year.
Well, did you and Joe Lee ever have any conversation about this?
Oh, I let it slide. Joe Lee was so good to us. He was so good to me and Robby, you know.
Well, he was a good racer.
Yeah,
He was one of, I guess, probably our first local hero that all of us had, and I guess we hung on to him.
And when he went on to run Grand National and won a race
Oh,
with them.
yeah, 1961, he won the
First Southern 500.
Yeah,
convertible race.
Yeah.
Sure did.
everybody knew who Joe Lee was then.
But I guess to kind of give you kind of a sign of the times, especially in the kid area, Dad didn't really do anything, had any kind of confrontation with Joe Lee. But my grandfather, if I'm understanding this correct, I think that
I knew there was more to this story, it's just coming out.
you know, so, like I say, the kids wasn't the place for ladies or You know, it was a.
Oh, back then, ladies wasn't allowed in there. If you wasn't 16 years old, you couldn't get the pits.
Well, Bobby and Robbie, this is going to wind up the first session of this. There'll be another session of this coming right soon, folks. But I want to take a moment now, guys, to remember Scott Bloomquist. For all of you that might not know, I guess you do, Scott lost his life this past week. He was one of the, he was the face of dirt track racing for many years wherever he went. He was just one of the all-time greats, and he lost his life in a plane crash. And just everyone, please remember Scott in your prayers. He's going to be that name being missed from the racetrack. It's going to be a big loss to all of us. He's one of the greats. He was a friend to a lot of us over the years, and everybody that got a chance to meet him, it was an honor to have met Scott. So remember him and his family in your prayers, guys. That can happen to any of us in a heartbeat. And with that being said, I'm Randall Davis. I want to thank you for watching, and want you to remember the Northfield Vineyard for all your anniversaries, your weddings, your birthday parties, any event that you might have that you want to remember. Please think about the Northfield Vineyard. You can do a lot with very little. You'll always remember your event. So with that being said, thank you for watching this episode.